Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the days that matter. From holidays to meaningful observances, we bring you inspiring conversations, stories, and ideas to make each day count. Whether it's raising awareness, learning something new, or simply sparking joy, this is your space to explore the calendar in a whole new way. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to share today's observance with you. Let's dive in. Scott DeLuzio is an Army veteran, author, and podcast host dedicated to helping veterans navigate life after service. He served 6 years with the Army National Guard, including a deployment to Afghanistan in 2010, where his brother Stephen also served and was tragically killed in action. Through profound grief and personal healing, Scott found purpose in advocacy. He founded the Drive On podcast, a show that gives voice to the struggles and triumphs of veterans, helping them find hope, healing, and a sense of community. His book, Surviving Son, is both a tribute to his brother's sacrifice and a reflection on the lasting impact of war on families. Today, in honor of Veterans Day, Scott joins us to share his journey from loss to leadership and how we can better support the men and women who've worn the uniform and their families. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
What inspired you and your brother to join the military?
Well, I think after 9/11, there were a lot of people were considering joining the military to go and fight and support the country, and that was something that he and I both I think it was kind of a big part of why we decided to join. My I was in college actually at the time when 9/11 happened, so I wanted to finish my studies and finish a degree there, and um, by the time I finished, a couple of years later, my brother had just joined the army, and so um, I looked at him as he kind of paved the path for me. And shortly after he joined, I learned that the military was not doing well as far as meeting their recruiting numbers, like the amount of people that they needed to join, and so. Um, that kind of got me upset a little bit because I thought, after 9/11, there were so many people who wanted to serve, like where did all
Yeah.
those people go? And then I realized that I was one of those people and I still haven't done anything. So I decided, at that point, it kind of makes sense. Let me just join. I was still young enough and able to do it. So I said, why not? So that's kind of how the two of us got into the army.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing the
Yeah,
story.
sure.
Can you take us back to your time in Afghanistan? What stands out most from that deployment?
Yeah, so the deployment where I was stationed in Afghanistan was very close to the Pakistan border, and the area that we were in was a major supply route for uh, American and other troops that were coming into there, as far as materials that would be shipped to Afghanistan, like on a cargo ship. Afghanistan
Yeah,
is a landlocked country, so none of the cargo ships could make it there. So they would dock in Pakistan and get off and drive by truck into Afghanistan. So part of our job was to secure that border area. And so, very often we'd go and there would be no issues, and it was a nice easy day. We were just there, and not a whole lot would happen. Um, that kind of started to get a little bit boring and kind of tedious along the way, and as we were doing those things, we started to realize that if we keep having these same days where not a whole lot's happening, we're going to get complacent, and that could be dangerous because then something could come out and surprise us and things like that. So we started doing some other missions when we weren't kind of patrolling that border area, and we would go out into villages nearby, and we do all sorts of other things just to kind of change things up and give us some variety. um,
yeah,
our our base was pretty well defended. We had a part of the base was a giant mountain. So, as far as enemy attacks, like that side of the base was not really a huge concern because they'd have to climb this huge mountain, and we had people on top of the mountain anyways to kind of look out for
yeah.
that.
Watch
So,
out.
so, so that was pretty good. And so we had a small portion of the base that was really vulnerable to those types of attacks. So it kind of made it a lot safer for us. Not to say that we never got attacked, but it was less than some other places. Later on in the deployment, we started going out even further. We ended up taking helicopters out to different villages to kind of hunt down the bad guys. Really, we
Yeah.
learned that the Taliban was hiding out in certain villages, and so we'd go there and we'd go and try to find them and find what they're doing and take them out if we could. Um, and it was on one of these missions where we were kind of far away from our base where I learned that my brother was killed. You know, as you mentioned
Oh, so
earlier.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so it was a regular mission just like any other day. We started basically as the sun rose. We started going into this village. Um, and we started kind of just going door to door. And we had worked side by side with the Afghan army, so they were we kind of were letting them take the lead on these missions, so that they were going in door to door, and then we were kind of following behind. And if they needed our help, we would be there to help them. If they could handle it, we just kind of let them handle it. But we're there kind of as support. Um, and as we're going through the village, I got a call on the radio saying that our commanding officer was looking for me, and so I got a little bit nervous, thinking I might have screwed something up and I might have done something wrong. And
Yeah.
so he ended up calling me, and I found him, and he came over and said, I have some bad news for you. Your brother's unit was ambushed and he got hit. And so in the back of my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, he's probably just injured. I never really
Yeah.
considered that something that bad could happen to him, because and this was looking back on it, I know it was naive thinking. It wasn't really realistic, because obviously war is a dangerous situation, and
Yeah.
bad things can happen to people there. But the way I thought of it was, that's just bad things like that are things that happen to other people. That doesn't happen to me and my
Yeah.
family. Like that's other people's thing. And unfortunately, that wasn't true. And he said, no, he actually was killed. And so that was, for me, that was the biggest takeaway from this deployment, was that moment when he told me that my brother was killed. What made matters worse is, if you think you probably couldn't get any worse than that at that point. Um, Probably about 15 or 20 minutes later, after finding out that my brother was killed, so I'm still grieving, I'm still sad, and trying to figure out what's actually going on. We started getting attacked from the village that we had just come out of. And so the Afghan army, as they were going door to door, they must have missed some stuff, and missed some weapons. And the Taliban who were in that village, they started attacking us. So I had to basically stop my personal grieving and the issues that I was dealing with. I had to kind of set that aside and focus on, how do I stay
Yeah.
alive? How do I keep my guys
Yeah.
alive? How do I make it so that my parents and my the rest of my family don't end up having to bury two people? And
Yeah.
so that's where my mind went. There was a lot of anger and rage that came with it, but basically, I made up my mind that they weren't going to get two of us today. That I wasn't
Yeah.
going to let that happen. So that was something that was really kind of a difficult thing for me to have to figure out how to do in that moment, because you don't really have much time to think at that point.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, hey, people are shooting at us right now. You have to figure this out. And so I had to kind of just put all the sadness aside and funnel all that energy into keeping myself alive, keeping my guys alive, and making sure that that everybody on our side, anyways, made it home safely.
Yeah. What was the hardest part about coming home after such a profound loss?
Yeah. So after coming home, it, it- I mean, I really had very little time to process anything that had happened. Anything from the grief of losing my brother, to having been just shot at just minutes later, after finding out that he was killed. I was home within probably 48 hours, at my house, in about 48 hours after all of that happened. And so it was a very, very quick transfer back home. And so I didn't really get a chance to sit there and talk with the other guys that I served with, who had gone through the same firefight that I was in.
Yeah.
And we didn't I didn't really get a chance to kind of I guess, decompress and process any of that stuff. So I came home, and immediately I was put into kind of a position where I felt like I needed to be there for my family. I needed to,
Yeah.
help them, help my parents, help my, you know, other family members, however I could. I felt like I needed to be the strong one and be there for everybody and do the things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily want to or need to do. And I wanted to be the one who took care of all that stuff for them. And that had a negative impact on me as far as uh, my mental state goes. I was not doing very well, as far as that goes, and I just sort of assumed things will just get better. Over time, yeah, sure, it's sad now, it's tough now, but it'll just get better. Unfortunately, it didn't get better, and I started just becoming a very angry person. I would just really yell and scream at just about anything that even just slightly irritated me. I would just be a, a disaster, and I would just blow up on anything. And um, I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I had lot of trouble just dealing with people in general. I would just kind of just like I said, get it really angry really easily, and I wasn't the easiest person to be around. So
Yeah. Well, what
eventually,
helped you?
I realized,
Okay.
yeah, eventually I just realized how bad it was, and I said I can't keep being this type of person. I have to do something to
Yeah.
to change. You know.
Yeah. So what helped you begin to heal and find direction again? Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind the scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, so for me, it was at first I had to admit that like I can't do this on my own. I'm not able to handle the pressures that I've been dealing with all on my own, and I need to ask for help. So I went to get some therapy um, from the military, and they were able to provide me what I needed, and and that helped me with things like the anger issues and helped me to not be that bad of a person to be around. And that was
Yeah.
important for me because I was married. I at the time I had a young son who he was born just a couple months before I deployed to Afghanistan. So he was growing up, and he was starting to kind of be aware of the world around him, and I was kind of a jerk, and I didn't want him to grow up with a father who was like that. So it was important to me to get better for him, and for my wife, and really for everybody. But I didn't think he deserved that. That was a problem that I was dealing with. I shouldn't put that problem on him. And so
Yeah.
when I started looking at how my actions were impacting other people, especially my son, I realized that is my if nothing else, that is my motivation for getting better. And
Yeah.
the more I can do to get better, the better things will be for him. And so that was my primary goal was to get better for him.
Well, in your own experience, what's the most misunderstood part of a veteran's transition to civilian life?
I think it really does vary for a lot of veterans. Some people have a much easier time than others. Some people they really struggle. For me, I was in the National Guard, and so National Guard soldiers, for the folks who are not familiar, who might be listening to this, they train one weekend out of the month and 2 weeks out of the year. So it's not. I was not a full time soldier while I was in kind of a training status. So I did have another job that I did too. So as far as my career goes, the transition wasn't that difficult because I already had a job, and so that was rather easy. What was difficult for me was when I came home from Afghanistan. That was in my mind such a important thing that I was doing, and the other people who were serving in Afghanistan as well, we're serving our country, and that has a big impact on a lot of people. And as far as I was concerned, that was like a real big thing. When I came back, everything else that I would do, and the job that I had, every little thing that I might do just didn't seem as important as what I had been doing. And it was hard to find any sense of purpose or meaning or sense of belonging with anybody outside of the people that I served with in the military. And
Yeah.
when you leave the military, very often the people that you served with, they continue to stay in, and they may go off and do their own thing someplace else, maybe, and you're left on your own, just like anybody else in the world. Like anybody is, essentially you're on your own, unless you go and seek out people who are, maybe have similar interests or similar, you know, beliefs or values or things like that you might become friends with these people. But for me, it was hard to go out there and make friends. Even the people that I was trying to make friends with, um, I just found myself not really relating to them, or them not relating to me, maybe might be a better way to put it.
Yeah.
And so that was just incredibly difficult. And I've heard from a lot of other veterans that they have a very similar struggle where they can relate to other veterans or other service members, but they can't really relate to people who have never served, and it just makes it really difficult to get out there and try to make friends. And really, it gets to be very uh, first off lonesome, like, because you feel like you just don't have anybody around who understands you. Um, but but it gets really tiring when you try to uh, go out there and form relationships, make friends. If you're not married, maybe you're finding a girlfriend or boyfriend, depending on who you are. But and you go and find these people, but you find you have nothing in common, and you do this over and over. And when you do this so many times, it just gets to be so tiring. At some point, you feel like you just want to give up and say, you know what? I don't really care if I have any friends. I
Yeah.
would rather just not have to deal with this anymore. And that's not the best way to deal with it, but that's the way unfortunately, a lot of veterans do end up dealing with it.
Well, what inspired you to start the Drive On podcast, and how has sharing these stories helped you and others heal?
Yeah. So the Drive On podcast, I started about 6.5 years ago now. And I started that podcast because a lot of the guys that I served with in Afghanistan, we all came home. Everybody that I deployed with in my unit, we all came home. But we started losing some of those guys to suicide when we got home. And that to me just didn't make any sense, because we went to a place where people wanted to kill us and we survived. And we came back to a place where people wanted nothing but the best for us.
Yeah.
And that's where we started losing people. And to me, that just didn't make any sense. And so I said, okay, I can't just sit around doing nothing. I need to do something. And I want to reach not just the guys that I served with, but I want to reach all the people who might be struggling in a similar way to some of the guys that I
Yeah.
knew. And so I decided, a podcast is a great way to do that, because it's free for the listener. They don't have to pay anything to access it. It's not like a
Yeah.
subscription thing or anything. And it's a nice way to kind of give back to the other veterans. And for me, it in sort of a selfish way, it sort of became a way for me to connect with other veterans and make friends. Like I was saying before, I was having a lot of trouble with that. And so I've made a lot of connections and a lot of friends with people who I've talked to on the podcast. And um, sometimes we haven't talked before the interview started. Like we'll start the interview, and by the end of the half hour or 45 minutes that we've been talking, it sometimes feels like we've known each other for years. And
Yeah.
it's really great to be able to have that sort of connection with somebody. And I find that with a lot of veterans, not every veteran, obviously each individual is going to be a little bit different, but with a lot of times with veterans, you can make those sort of connections really easily. And so for me, that's helped me to be able to get out there and make some of those connections that I otherwise probably wouldn't have done.
Yeah. Your book, Surviving Son, is
Yeah.
deeply personal. What was it like writing the book, and What do you hope readers take away from it?
Yeah, so writing the book was a little bit more difficult than I imagined it would be. Um, when I started writing the book, I actually started writing just notes, like in a notebook, when I first came home from Afghanistan because I knew there were things that I didn't want to forget. That eventually maybe my kids would have questions about what I did, what happened to their uncle, and all these kind of things um, that might happen uh, in the future that I just didn't
Yeah,
want to forget. So I had a bunch of notes written down in no particular format or order or anything, and uh, I kind of came across them one day and I said, this belongs in a book. This should be more than just notes collecting dust in a drawer somewhere. And so I decided to start writing. Um, I wrote and rewrote it several times. Like I revised it and changed things up many times. It was just a hard thing to write, and I found myself getting to the part of the story that I sort of described in kind of general detail earlier, uh, where my brother was killed, and I found that to be the most difficult piece to write of the entire book. I kept finding myself getting to that point in the story and saying, "Oh, you know what? I'll come back to that another time, and I'll write
yeah,
something else." And I kept like procrastinating and not wanting to actually write that piece of it. And so when I eventually did get to write it, it it allowed me to. Uh, Process a little bit more of what had happened. Not saying that it allowed me to fully process and heal everything, but it allowed me to kind of think about what had happened. I learned through interviews with other people who were with my brother a little bit more of like what happened to him. And it just kind of gave me a sense that I was doing something, again, not necessarily for me, but I was doing something for him because he's no longer here to tell his story. And I wanted to be able to tell his story in the best way possible, in a way that would outlive both of us. And so this book now is in a printed format that hopefully will be around for many years, and many years even after I'm no longer here. And that way people can read it and get an understanding of what it was like to be in Afghanistan and what it was like to fight in a war like that from one person's perspective. I know there's a lot of other books out there that's been written about war and people's experiences. This is another one of those types of stories from my perspective, and also from my brother's as best as I could. Obviously, he wasn't here to
yeah,
ask him those kind of questions, but I did the best I could to kind of get his kind of the things that happened with him and in his perspective.
yeah,
So that to me was it was difficult to write, but that's my reason for writing it is I want this thing to the story to last for a long
yeah.
time.
Oh, thank you so much. And finally, what message do you have for other veterans who feel hopeless or disconnected?
Yeah, that's a great question. The um, very often veterans will feel like I described disconnected from maybe it's just society in general. Maybe they don't relate really well with civilians, or um, they just have trouble with that and feel hopeless. They like this will never get better. The thing is, um, yeah, right now it may feel like it's never going to get better, but eventually it will get better. You just have to give it time, and you have to
Yeah,
allow yourself to, um, feel some of the bad emotions that you might have. It sucks sometimes to be sad, to be depressed, to be angry, but sometimes you just need to be because that's what's going on in your life. But eventually you'll be able to get through those things. And I tell people all the time that you've survived 100% of your bad days so far. You can get through today, you can get through tomorrow, and just keep doing that over and over again. And eventually you'll find your way to a better way of doing things. And like anything else, there's trial and error involved. When you have a problem, try something out. If it works, great, you found a solution. If it doesn't work, well, okay, well, now know one more thing that doesn't work. So try something else and keep trying, and until you find whatever works for you. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but there's so many options for people out there, whether it's social groups to get connected with other people. You could be like me. You could start a podcast, or you can do
Yeah.
any number of different things, and you can really get connected that way. And I think that's a just a great thing to strive for. And hopefully there's some veterans out there who get out there and make those connections and really have find that renewed sense of purpose and meaning in their lives.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Scott. Scott, where can listeners learn more about you and also connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So the podcast you can find at driveonpodcast.com. The book that you mentioned, Surviving Sun, it's available on Amazon, so you can get it straight from there. Additionally, one thing I didn't mention that I just wanted to put out there real quick, if I can, is I'm also associated with the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation, which is an organization that's trying to build a war memorial in Washington D.C. for all the service members, the families, and all the folks who sacrificed and throughout this whole war. And so it's really just a great initiative that they have going on. And so for anyone who is interested in learning more about that, you can go to gwatmemorialfoundation.org, and you can find out a lot more information about that. But I just wanted to put that in there as well. But as far as me personally, driveonpodcast.com is probably the best place. Has all the links to where you can subscribe to the show and social media. It's all at Drive On Podcast, so you can find it all there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll put the links in the description so listeners can just click and go directly to the site. Thank you so
Excellent.
much,
Thank you so
Scott.
much. Thank you.
Yes. That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life's special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.